Well, hello, hockey fans. Welcome back to the Hockey Writers Live, July 29th, 2021. We should already be a month into summer vacation by now. But no, as you know, we have had all kinds of stuff happen. We've had an expansion draft happen. We've had an entry draft happen. And we've had the first day of free agency happen. And figured this would be a great opportunity to kind of get caught up on the whirlwind that was, and over $500 million spent. And to help us do that, we welcome a former THW writer with us and currently with the Sporting News. This is Jackie Spiegel. Hi, Jackie.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate your time. How are you doing, first off?
Oh, it's been a bit of a busy couple of weeks here with the final, with, like you mentioned, the expansion draft, free agency, the Olympics. A lot going on. A lot going on.
So much going on in so little time. And I figure we're not going to get through every signing here, but we figure we would try to get through some of the biggest pieces of news that came out of the day. And I think later in the day, first the thing that came out was the New Jersey Devils landing Dougie Hamilton. He gets for the max 7 years and he gets $9 million a year. Are we to the point that the Devils are starting to put the pieces together here where they're turning that corner and now they have a cornerstone in Hamilton to help with that?
Well, I think this is something that's been in the works for a while in terms of the Devils kind of rebuild. I think as soon as Tom Fitzgerald took over, even though he was the interim GM for a little bit, you could tell. I mean, he made a splash in that first trade deadline that he was in charge, and made some deals and got rid of some guys, got rid of some contracts, and you could just tell that this is a team that is up and coming. Look, they have Jack Hughes, they have Mackenzie Blackwood, who is one of the strongest young netminders in the game. They have obviously some veterans. They have guys now. They have Jonathan Bernier also now to back up Blackwood, who is a very good backup for Mackenzie. This is a team that can compete. And now obviously getting Dougie Hamilton, they're going to contend for at least a playoff spot in that Metro division for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, kind of look at the model at Tampa Bay, and we'll get to them in a second here because they made some pretty big news too. But you have to have a good goalie. You have to have that elite defenseman and a couple pieces up front. It seems like adding Hamilton really adds to that puzzle. And I agree with you. I think they're going to ultimately at least be in the conversation for a playoff spot. So Tampa Bay, they did something today in extending out BRAYDEN Point to the max 8 years. He gets 9.5, kind of similar to what some of their other core players get. I guess my question is, how in the world did they get the money for this?
Well, I mean, they obviously got rid of some guys too, right?
Yeah, they did.
Got rid of
Tyler Johnson was one.
Thank you, Tyler Johnson, and he was taken in the expansion draft.
Yanni Gord.
This is where my brain is. Sorry.
No, listen, I am right there with you. There is no judgment here. I'm glad we don't get a quiz.
So. There's so much going on. But yes, obviously losing Yanni Gord, obviously losing Tyler Johnson, they free up cap space. This is also something that doesn't start till next season, right? Because I believe it was an extension. So who knows what will be happening a year from now? Will the cap even go up in a year? From my understanding, I don't think it will, but it doesn't mean it won't happen if things are really good this year. So it's an interesting move, but look, BRAYDEN Point is a star.
Right.
And he's a playoff star, which is huge because obviously they've won back-to-back, Stanley Cups. So what he's done in the last 2 playoffs for that team, he deserves to get the money that he got. And I think we all know that Julien Brisebois knows what he's doing. He knows how to work the cap. He knows how to work the space. I'm not saying they're going to go the same route that they went this year necessarily, obviously, but I think he knows how to make it work. And like I said, it's not something that starts until next year. So who knows what can happen in the next year plus until, when that contract actually kicks in.
Yeah, it seems like that they're very much poised to try to three-peat, and to be able to be in a position like that, that's in a cap world, that's very, very impressive. And see where it all goes. Continuing down our list here, let's talk about someone who's still with their team that I did not expect to be still with their team at this point, and that's Jack Eichel. I mean, are we waiting on Vegas to make a move here, or do you feel like are we starting to entertain the possibility that he could start training camp with the Buffalo Sabres?
I mean, the fact that training camp is only like a month and away, 6 weeks away at this point. I mean, there's obviously a good chance that he's still with Buffalo, and whether or not that's really in the cards for what he wants necessarily, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Ryan Kennedy of the Hockey News actually tweeted out a trade that he had heard about involving Vegas that was actually really good if you're a Sabres fan, and obviously works for Vegas because they get Jack Eichel, but obviously he comes with a 10 million cap hit, so it's a little hard to see how they would fit him into their structure. Obviously losing Marc-Andre Fleury for nothing, which that whole situation, in my opinion, was not handled properly.
Brutal.
But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. I believe I heard today that there is some question marks regarding obviously Jack Eichel's health with his neck and to seeing how that works. So that could be keeping some teams away. We obviously know that the Rangers are involved. Jack Eichel was reported skating in Boston today with some other players from the area. So it's very interesting to see what will happen with him. If he remains in Buffalo, is that the worst thing? I don't know. But I feel like Kevin Adams is being smart about it, that he's trying to find the best deal for him. It's not, he's making it about what's best for the Sabres, not what's best for Jack Eichel.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine the Eichel camp being happy about this at all. But again, we really don't know all the specifics until it gets out. But what I find interesting too is the trade that Vegas did make in all of this with Ottawa and getting Evgeny Dadonov to go in. So you're adding cap. If you're going to do that, they have to ship out cap somewhere. So,
well, I mean, we know Vegas is going to make moves, and we know they're going to be a little, I don't know,
not so personable.
Yeah. I mean, look, they got rid of Nate Schmidt, who didn't know what was happening. They got rid of Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yep.
Is the franchise face of that organization since day one. They're not afraid to make the deals and make the moves. So, they're adding pieces that they think are important and pieces that they think are valuable. I don't think they got a backup goalie today.
Who's that?
My head, Vegas. Did they add a goalie?
Not that I saw anyway.
And you need to add somebody, obviously, to back up Robin Leonard. So
you're
going to have to add money because their backup or their minor leaguers are not NHL caliber as of today. Right. So, Kelly McCrimmon's going to do what Kelly McCrimmon needs to do, though. He's not afraid to make moves. He's not afraid to cut ties when needed. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in Vegas for sure.
Absolutely. Jackie Spiegel, the deputy editor with the Sporting News, joining us here on the Hockey Writers Live. And so Philippe Grubauer is next on my list here. 6 years at 5.9 with the Seattle Kraken. So that leaves a gaping hole in net for the Avalanche. And then Seattle gets, pretty good goalie who could have been in the Vezina conversation last year. What do you make of that situation on both ends?
Well, obviously Colorado, Gabe Landeskog was actually on NHL Network when the news kind of came down and was a little surprised, I think, by the news that, Philip Grubauer was not staying in Colorado. Joe Sakic, I believe on his call today, was saying that they obviously are now in the market and they have some guys on the radar. It's an interesting move for the Kraken if you think about it, because they just gave Chris Driedger so much money and they made it sound like he was their top guy. It's kind of an interesting move. I personally don't know if Chris Driedger is definitely a number one starter. He might be like a 1B. So getting Grubauer actually proves that, Ron Francis and Dave Haxel are actually thinking in that same kind of realm, that they needed a more of a 1A kind of goalie. And that's what they get in Grubauer. He was the Vezina finalist last year, and he has shown that he can, compete. The question mark obviously is that last year he was playing in front of playing behind a Colorado Avalanche squad that is not the Seattle Kraken at this point.
So a quick hitter on Seattle. Are they a playoff team in year one? In your opinion?
I'm not really great with predictions.
Okay.
Honest, because it's always hard because you always want to gauge it against Vegas, right?
You always do. Yep. But
I also probably wouldn't have said that Vegas was a playoff team after their expansion draft.
Exactly.
It's kind of hard because look, Mark Giordano is definitely one of the top defensemen in the game.
Yep.
Jamie Oleksiak is a very good defenseman. Adam Larson is a fantastic defenseman. I mean, they do have really good defense, and they really have, obviously now they have a really good goalie. So it could be that what happens is that this becomes almost like an Islander team where they don't maybe get a whole lot of goals, but they get a whole lot of great defense. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to say that they're probably on the cusp.
Yeah, the weak division tells me that they're on the cusp, and I think they make it just because, adding a guy like Jaden Schwartz, getting Eberle and others in the expansion draft. I mean, they got pieces there, like you said. I think they can do it, and I think the weak division helps their cause in that case. So, Jack, you'll go to the next one I have on my list here, and that's Blake Coleman. We knew that the cap was probably going to squeeze him out of Tampa Bay. He gets 6 years at $4.9 million in a place I did not expect, which is Calgary. You knew that they were going to try to make possibly some changes to their core. What kind of a fit is that in your mind for Coleman in Calgary?
Sorry. I will say that, so I do kind of cover the Canadian teams a little bit more than I cover teams in America. And I actually do think Blake Coleman's a pretty good fit for a Daryl Sutter team. Daryl likes to play really strong defensive game. He likes to play, low scoring, giving up low amount of goals kind of team defense. He kind of fits into that realm, right? He's a really good penalty killer. He's a really good, defensive forward. He was on the third line. He's also a guy that kind of mucks it up a little bit. And he's a good person. I dealt with him also in Jersey a little bit, Blake Coleman. So he's definitely a kind of guy that I think fits in well with Calgary. And Brad Treliving also needed to make some moves this year to keep his job, I think. My biggest question mark for Calgary now, though, is what happens with Sean Monahan. There's a lot of talk about him being moved out. There's an expectation, obviously, of Johnny Gaudreau sticking around a little bit longer, getting an extension sometime soon. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I do think Calgary needs a little bit more offensive punch to their team right now. They don't really, in my opinion, have a guy who can sit there and be like, okay, we need a goal. Go get a goal.
Get it. Yep.
But I will say they have obviously Jacob Markstrom in net, and he is fantastic. So
for sure,
it'll be interesting to see what happens. They also got rid of Derek Ryan, supposedly signed with the Oilers. So that's a loss for them as well. And he was that third line center that probably would have played with a Blake Coleman. So it's kind of interesting to see who they expect to be that centerman for that third line. And then obviously, filling the hole of Mark Giordano is going to be quite interesting to see what happens there.
Sticking in Alberta, then you mentioned the Oilers. They end up with Tyson Barrie again. They re-signed him 3 at 4.5. But then also made an interesting trade, in my opinion, dealing Ethan Bear to the Carolina Hurricanes in exchange for Warren Foegele. I thought they were looking for defenders, especially, Larson being gone. Now Bear's gone. I know that they signed Barrie. How confident are you in the Oilers and their blue line right now, being that that's always been a point of emphasis for them?
Well, I will say overall real quick that I actually really like a lot of the moves that the Oilers made in this offseason. Maybe not the trade of Ethan Bear, because I really don't understand that one, to be honest with you. I do think Ethan Bear is a very young but very good defenseman, and it's interesting that they got rid of a guy who can play on their blue line for a number of years. He did make mistakes, I'm not going to lie. Like, he made a pretty decent one in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but he is a really strong defenseman, and it's actually a little surprising that they gave up on him so early. But I will say, obviously, Tyson Barrie went into this past season with a show-me deal. He had a 1-year deal with the Oilers, and he showed them what he can do. And I watched a lot of Oilers games. Him and Darnell Nurse, both on that blue line, are fantastic. Darnell Nurse is, in my opinion, should have been more in the Norris Trophy conversation than he was. He is a phenomenal defenseman. And don't forget, they also added Duncan Keith, who he will not be a top defenseman. He will not be in their top 4. He's probably going to be more, maybe in the middle, or he'll be definitely the third pair. And I think that we need to also remember that he brings a lot of intangibles in Duncan Keith. But I think what people don't realize is that he spent the whole year away from his kid, right? And that's a really big mental grind to go through. He talked about that on his call with reporters. I was on that call. He talked about that a lot, about how it wore on him not being able to see his child in person for the majority of the past year. And I don't think people realize like how much that affects your game. You have this kind of weighing over you. And I actually think Duncan Keith is going to have a great year in Edmonton. I think he doesn't have the responsibility of being the guy. He doesn't have the responsibility of even being maybe one of the top veteran guys, right? Because you have your Connor McDavids, you have your Leon Draisaitl. So I think he's going to play a really big role, Duncan Keith, on that blue line. I will say, not a huge fan of the Mike Smith signing, maybe for 1 year, but not for 2.
Not for 2, yep.
I will say also that I actually love the Zach Hyman trade, or signing.
Signing, yep.
Zach Hyman is one of the best guys in the league. He works immensely hard. He is a penalty killer. He can play on the power play. He's the guy that creates space for Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner in Toronto.
Yep.
He is this guy who is going to be perfect fit for Connor McDavid, for Leon Draisaitl, and for probably Jesse Puljujarvi also on that wing, right? He is such a critical component. He's the guy that they've been looking for. He's going to take the spot that Zach Kassian was filling. Zach Kassian was not the guy that should have been filling that spot up top. Okay. So I think adding Zach Hyman is probably the deal that is going to solidify this Oilers team as a playoff team in the next season.
Will definitely be interesting to see. Just got a few more for Jackie Spiegel here of the sporting news. Just want to get your quick take here. Philippe Deneau is now a Los Angeles King. He ended up going 6 years, $5.5 million. Kind of a loss is that for Montreal. We knew that the Canadiens are strong down the middle, especially young. Yeah. Didn't seem like there was just too much room there. So it seemed like that was inevitable, but still it's a perennial Selke candidate for sure.
It's a little surprising that so from my understanding, they discussed a contract early in the year, but then nothing happened after that. There was no more even conversations between him and the Canadiens, which is actually kind of surprising. I mean, I think he proved himself pretty good in that play up front. He's a really quality centerman. You know, he doesn't necessarily bring an offensive punch to the game, but he definitely shuts down the other team. I mean, he shut down Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. He shut down, the Vegas Golden Knights top players. He shut down the Winnipeg Jets guys. He's the kind of guy that just can shut down the opposition. It's intriguing that the Kings were the team that signed him, considering how many young players they have coming up.
Yeah.
They have Alex Turcotte. They have Quinton Byfield. They have, obviously Anze Kopitar. Like, it's very intriguing, that signing. And as you mentioned earlier, that the Pacific Division is going to be a weak division. I don't know necessarily where he fits, but he deserved to get paid. He deserved to get his money. He's shown that he's like the top defensive forward in the game. And he'll definitely be on the Selke conversation this year for sure, I would think.
Absolutely. And so got to talk about, I think you're on the call with the Canes and Tony DeAngelo. Just what did you get out of that call? And, was there anything explained as in how it landed that the Canes agreed to a contract here?
According to GM Don Waddell, they spoke to everyone that they could speak to. They even spoke to their own players, Jesper Fast, and I'm assuming Jesper Fast and Brady Shea, because he said he spoke to his own players that have played with Tony DeAngelo, and those were two of his ex-teammates on the Rangers. He said it was a decision made by the group, by Rod Brind'Amour was involved in the decision making. He basically said that, they've spoke with Tony for a long time about it. This wasn't something that happened overnight. That, he's a good player, which he is. Nobody can argue about his skill on the ice. It's not about the skill level, right? It's about the other things.
Exactly.
He said that Tony understands what he did. He understands his mistakes, which Tony also reiterated that he understands his mistakes. He also said, though, however, that his mistakes were on the ice, that he had never done anything off the ice, which is a little, I don't know how much we want to get into everything, but right. I think we all know that's not 100% accurate in people's minds. They were asked both of them were asked on the call about, the Hurricane fans not being happy. I don't know.
Situation.
I don't know. The only thing now is there was rumors about the Hurricanes also adding Jake Virtanen, who, as you know, is involved in a sexual assault case in Vancouver. Obviously if they do add him in addition to Tony DeAngelo, it makes you really question kind of what's going on there a little bit.
I think I saw that there was, I want to say it was Sarah Sivian in The Athletic awesome Canes fall. I think she came out with a tweet saying that there was no interest in Jake Virtanen there. So
okay. There was something mentioned, I think, like a day or two ago. Mm-hmm. I think everyone kind of lost their minds a little bit. Like, you're going to get Tony DeAngelo and Jake Virtanen. I don't think that really works. But yeah. I don't think Jake Virtanen will have a job this year, to be honest.
No, it would be stunning. I mean, the way that the league works, never say never, but it would still be very stunning if he did. That would be for sure. Go ahead.
I was going to say, look, Tony can say what Tony needs to say. The question is, he has to show it.
That's it.
And I will say this, Don Waddell did make it clear that this is while we mentioned that Tyson Barrie earlier signed a show me deal, this is a show me deal for Tony.
Ultimate show me deal. Yep.
This is not on the ice level for Tony DeAngelo. This is show me that you've understood what you've done. You've understood the ramifications. You understand that this cannot be. This doesn't fly, you know. Yep. And I think, you know, he, like Don Waddell said, he deserves more money than he's getting because of his skill level, and he's not getting that right now.
That's right.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens and what transpires over the next year.
Yeah, everyone will be watching. There's no doubt about that. Two more real quick for you, because there was a flip of goalies between the Leafs and the Canes in terms of who signed where. Peter Mrazek is now with the Leafs and Freddie Anderson is now with the Canes. Yep. Did the Leafs get better here?
I don't know. I think they're kind of comparable. Freddie's a very good goaltender. He was an all-star a couple years ago. I think Peter was close to being an all. Maybe he was hurt. He might have been one of the guys that was hurt for an all-star game. But Fred is a very good goaltender. He obviously struggled this past year. He dealt with a knee I believe it was a lower body injury, if I remember correctly, this past year. He had an injury. I can't remember exactly. Yep. I don't want to say the wrong thing. But, you know, he definitely dealt with an injury this past year. He kind of lost the job to Jack Campbell, who kind of, you know, just skyrocketed a little bit there for the Leafs. But obviously he did struggle a little bit in the playoffs. I don't know if Peter Mrazek makes him better. I think there are a couple other holes in the Leafs that they need to address outside of goaltending. But Peter Mrazek has obviously proven that he can be the guy for at least a little bit in Carolina. But he also kind of lost his job a little bit to Nedeljkovic. So it's kind of like a weird dynamic between these two guys. But, you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. Obviously, you know, being in Toronto, it's pressure filled, to say the least. So it'll be interesting to see how he does handling the media. Especially now that we're going to be back in locker rooms, hopefully, knock on wood, in the new season. So I don't know if he's prepared for about 50 people being surrounding him on a daily basis in Toronto, but it'll be interesting to see.
And just the last one for you real quick. Was there a team or teams that you feel really excelled in day one of free agency in your mind?
Well, I mean, you have to look at Dallas a little bit, right? You know, Ryan Suter, Braden Holtby. Obviously does make you question what's going on with Ben Bishop a little bit there. That they also added Braden Holtby. But I think, obviously Dallas kind of came, out of the gate. 12 noon and 30 seconds hit, and I got an email from the Stars. So that they signed Ryan Suter. So, stuff was moving pretty quickly. Obviously, we have no idea what the Islanders are doing. There's been rumors about what they've done, but nothing has been official, so it's hard to gauge what they're working on. Obviously, there's rumors about, Kyle Palmieri staying in the island. There's obviously rumors about Zach Parise, but we don't know because nothing's been announced. So that's kind of interesting there. I will say again, like I said earlier, I do really like what the Oilers did, to be honest. Yeah,
and I'll just wrap it real quick and saying I like what the Bruins did too. Getting Linus Ullmark, especially with Tuukka Rask very much up in the air as a UFA and injured, is a big thing. Landing a leader like Nick Foligno to add to the already stellar leadership that they've got up there, I think they did a very good job. Jackie, you did a really great job. Thank you so much for joining us, fans. Make sure that you do follow her. Does great work with the sporting news, covers, like she says, a lot of the Canadian teams up there, but all throughout the National Hockey League. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So fans, stay tuned. Part 2 is coming up next. We're going to have our panel. We're going to keep the free agency talk going, so stay tuned. All right. You have made it back to part 2 of the Hockey Writers Live, and it's actually our last episode of the season, believe it or not, here on July 29, 2021. I am your host, Mark Scheig. And yes, this is going to be our last episode because we're going to take the whole month of August off to kind of get caught up and rested up for the hustle and bustle that this season has been. But yet in 6 weeks or so, we're going to be back for training camp already. So you might as well try to get as much rest as you can. So just be on the lookout for that. We're going to be off for August. We'll be back in September. But again, make sure that you don't miss any of our podcasts. We have a whole slew of shows, network of podcasts here. You can catch them out on the different, like iHeartRadio and Apple and Spotify, whichever way you want to go. Just make sure you don't miss a thing that way. So let's get our panel in here, free agency and everything. We got a couple of our members of the free agency team coming in to give their reaction to the day that was for day one. This is Scott Roche and Kristy Flannery. Hi, guys. Welcome back.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Mark.
Doing good. Thanks for asking. Hi. Scott, I'm going to start with you here. Any which way you want to go with this. Which team, or actually I should just say, what is your biggest takeaway overall from the day if you had to really pinpoint one or two things that you took away from day one?
Well, first of all, I think I saw before we came on, $750 million, I think was handed out in money today.
$750 million. Yeah.
I mean, that's for a flat cap, that's wild. But I think take away the goal movement with Philip Grubauer going to Seattle, and basically Peter Mrazek and Frederick Anderson flipping spots with Carolina and Toronto. I think that's going to be a big loss for Colorado, in that he was as good as there is out there, and props to Seattle for signing him, going out there. I mean, I think they have now 4 goalies, but bringing him in is just a big time signing for an expansion team.
I think they're a playoff team, honestly, after, the way that they've got it going on here. But Kristy, what was your one or two big takeaways from the first day of free agency?
I do agree with Scott. When I was looking at these contracts, I was like, what are these people doing math? I don't know how half of these teams are making this work, especially, Chicago. I still don't know how they're doing it, but definitely just the length of the contracts. And didn't we learn anything from Zach Parise and Ryan Suter? These long contracts, they don't end well. So that was kind of the biggest thing for me. I do agree also that Grubauer was a huge grab for Seattle. I feel like after the expansion draft, we were all wondering who their franchise player was. And I think today we kind of got an answer.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% on that. And I agree with both of you about the dollars, because it's just an insane number. And we might have a flat cap again next year too. So we'll see, where that all goes. But yeah, just a lot of term too. We'll go over some names in a minute, but just some things happened that I definitely did not expect. So it kind of goes to the next question here with you, Kristy. One thing I did not expect is Jack Eichel still with the Buffalo Sabres. I did not see that, given how much they were trying to push to make a deal happen.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are, at least as of we're recording on Wednesday the 28th. He has not been traded yet. Makes me wonder if he's going to be in training camp for the Sabres come training camp. What do you think?
They need to just let him go. They're not going to get at this point what they want from him. So at this point, it's such a toxic professional relationship. Cut your ties, cut your losses, and you got to just move on at this point, because having him on that team, it's a dark cloud over the Buffalo Sabres. And on top of that, they have more to worry about. They don't even have a goaltender right now. But you just need to cut ties with Eichel and just get in the right direction.
Scott, what is your take on this Jack Eichel saga?
I agree. They need to cut ties with him. I think this is going to be a big move for Kevin Adams as GM, because he lost some players are now down. Some of the players he had are now down in Florida. Eichel's really the only big name he has left on the roster. And I think the return is going to have to be a pretty good one for Adams. I saw the report out there about Vegas offering Riley Smith a couple players on a first-round draft pick.
Yep.
At this point, I can't see him wanting to deal him within not only division, but within the state of New York to the Islanders or Rangers, I think that would just be a PR nightmare. So I think sooner or later, he's just got to move on from him. And my gut's telling me it's probably going to be a Western Conference team, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think it's going to, if I had to pick a team, it'd probably be Vegas. And I'm surprised if the Ryan Kennedy tweet I know went out there about what the potential package was, and Peyton Krebs, a very, very, very high-end prospect, was included. The fact that Buffalo hasn't taken that deal yet just makes me wonder what's really going on here. So see where that one all goes. So Scott, I'll go back to you here. Before we started recording tonight, Dougie Hamilton got paid. He got 7 years and he got $9 million a year. So make heads or tails of that. And are the New Jersey Devils starting to really turn the corner toward progressing to be a playoff team?
They got some good forwards. I'm not sure they're turning the corner to be a playoff team just yet. I think they need more pieces. However, I think it was 7 for 9 for him.
7 years, $9 million per.
As was mentioned earlier, 3 years in Boston, the Bruins moved on. 3 years in Calgary, the Flames moved on. 3 years in Carolina, now the Hurricanes have moved on. He's a good defenseman, but it seems like about around year 3, he wears out his welcome everywhere. And you wonder where the Devils are in 3 years. Are they a playoff team at that point? Have they added pieces around him to become a playoff team? And if they haven't, then you really got to wonder what that contract's going to look like and how they're going to feel about it with 4 years remaining.
Kristy covers the Devils for us, so make heads or tails of this for us, please.
If the Devils aren't a playoff team in 3 or 4 years, we have a whole lot of other issues than just Dougie Hamilton's contract. Yep. I feel the way about him the way I do about PK Subban. It's a move potentially in the right direction, but he is not the answer to the Devils' woes. I don't personally like the contract. I would have taken him for 4 or 5 years. He's 28 years old. He's not 22. So I really don't like the length of it. As far as being overpaid, I feel like most of these players are overpaid at this point. So I guess he is on line with other big name defensemen. I'm not really that keen on it, but I guess he's 6'6", I believe. Graves is 6'5". Kevin Ball, who's a prospect, he's coming up. He's 6'6". So I like the size that they're putting on the Devils' blue line. I think it's a step in the right direction, but I don't like the contract.
In case you're just joining us, it is THW Live for July 29th, 2021. Our panel, Scott Roche, Kristy Flannery, joining us talking about all things free agency. And Kristy, we'll start with you on our next question, which is just, was there a team or two, in your opinion, that really stood out as doing very well on day one of free agency?
I'm going to say Seattle. And actually, I'm going to go with Detroit. I think Yzerman's doing right by Detroit. If they're not making the big flashy moves, but they're going in the right direction. And Seattle, they got a couple Stanley Cup winners on their roster. They have potentially a face of the franchise. So I think both of them did pretty well.
I think Boston did well. And Scott, I know you're kind of close to them. What do you think?
I think they did well. I think that David Krejci, I think right now is the one question mark going forward. What's that gonna look like on the second line with Hall, who they locked up last week, and Smith? Defensively, we signed Mike Riley, and they added Darcy. So I like those. But you got to wonder what's going on in that. They signed Linus Ullmark to a 4-year, $5 million deal. So you wonder if the time with Tuukka Rask is over. Although Don Sweeney did say in his media availability a short time ago that the door is open for a reunion with Tuukka Rask when Tuukka's healthy. So whether that happens or not, that remains to be seen. They did trade Daniel Vladar a couple hours ago to Calgary. Yep. So probably going with a Ullmark Swayman combo at the beginning of the year, but I'm not quite sure what the rules are in terms of Rask having to sign out, or can they re-sign him closer towards January, February when he's due to return. But Sweeney didn't close the door on the return and having Ullmark and Rask as possible second half goalies.
I think that, the door is very much open back if he's willing to do it. So clearly bringing Ullmark in, you're obviously, and then they got rid of, Halak is no longer there either. He's up in Vancouver. So definitely something to watch to see how that transpires. So Scott, I'm just going to go rapid fire on some of the bigger contracts and bigger moves that kind of happened. And I'll start with a player that's staying with his current team, and that's Brayden Point. 8 years, $9.5 million per year. So very similar numbers to like your Victor Hedman, your Vasilevskis of the world. Can't be that surprised that it happened, but where in the world are they getting all the money?
Well, considering the issues they went through last year.
Yeah.
I mean, they get rid of a lot of people. They moved on from the whole third line. It was a big key in the Stanley Cup run. I think they needed to do it. They needed to lock him up. They need him down there.
Yep.
I just don't know what the fallout's going to be moving forward after their top two lines, because you saw what they did in the playoffs with three lines. I mean, that third line you could say was a big time key in the Stanley Cup Finals against Montreal.
100%. You know, Gord is gone. We'll talk about Blake Coleman in a minute, but Kristy, Brayden Point, your thoughts?
I kind of feel the same way. I feel like Scott and I are kind of on the same page. My only concern is you're giving all that money to your first line, your first two lines. Mm-hmm. We know what happens with teams that don't have the depth in the playoffs. And now they lost that third line. And now what money are you going to give and who's going to replace that third line? So that's my only concern. I do agree you had to lock them up, but now where do you go from there?
Exactly. Yep. I definitely agree with all that. So Blake Coleman now, let's talk about him. He gets 6 years, $4.9 million per, with a team that I did not expect to have happen in the Calgary Flames. So used to be with the Devils, so he's on a bad team, gets traded, wins 2 Stanley Cups, and then gets paid. Talk about living the life. Kristy, how great is it to be Blake Coleman right now?
I mean, is there anybody better right now? Like, Blake Coleman had the best pandemic of anybody, anybody in the world. No, I was not expecting that team either. I was shocked. I did see an interview with him where he said it was really a family decision and about where they kind of wanted to raise their children. So I give him a lot of respect for that, but hey, he got paid. The problem with a player like Coleman, I don't even say it's a problem, but you know what you get with him. You know the kind of player he is. If you're going to overpay him, that's on you.
Go ahead, Scott. What do you think about Blake Coleman in Calgary?
I think it's a good move by the Flames. I think it may be a little more than what I expected him to get, but I think it's a good move. Good for him. He's a good second, third line player that's going to help out down there with the secondary scoring and the grinding, and he just does a lot of the dirty work. So I think that's a great pickup for them, and good for him for getting that money. I know that earlier this morning he was linked to the Bruins, but then Calgary kind of slipped in there at the end and got him. But good for him. I mean, he certainly has earned it after the last couple of seasons in Tampa.
Well, we're going to actually do something a little bit different off key here because we have breaking news. And I know that fans, when you're listening to this, you're going to listen to this or watch us on Thursday, but we're recording on Wednesday night. It's about 7:45 Eastern time. And there's a huge trade that is about to go down. I'm going to kind of see the details of it here, and we'll get kind of your first impressions of it for both of you. Hearing, this is Craig Morgan, wonderful writer for the Coyotes. He is hearing that the Coyotes are trading Darcy Kuemper to the Colorado Avalanche for a first-round pick and defenseman Connor Timmins. Scott, what is your first reaction when you hear that?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, they lost GRUBAUER today, so I think they had to do something. Darcy Kuemper is not a bad goalie. Is he the answer? Time will tell, but I think everyone was waiting to see after the GRUBAUER news broke, what's Colorado going to do? And they really didn't do anything, and they were kind of like hiding out in the weeds there. And it really doesn't surprise me that Arizona's been making a few trades, but I think that's a good get for Colorado considering where they're at right now after they lost GRUBAUER.
And Kristy, your first initial impression to that trade?
My initial thought is if they were going to do a trade, why didn't they trade for Dallas for Ben Bishop?
I wonder if health is an issue with Bishop, if they had to get Holtby.
Yeah, that's my only question, because I think healthy, Ben Bishop is a really good goaltender.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my only thing. I mean, they need a goalie, and a lot of the goalies that are left, they're all older, and Colorado has a pretty young core. So I mean, they needed somebody. Yeah,
I actually like the move. I mean, when healthy, Kemper's an awesome goalie. He was putting up stellar numbers until he got injured. Yeah, and the Bishop thing too, I think, is health related. The fact that Dallas now has Jake Ottinger and Braden Holtby as your 1 and 2. That really does not bode well for Bishop. So we have to see where that one ends up going. So I'll leave you guys with just one last question here before we wrap it up. So Kristy, I'll go back to you.
Okay.
Got to talk about Tony DeAngelo. Got the 1 year, $1 million contract with Carolina. Obviously got a lot of reaction. A lot of Canes fans did not like the move.
Yeah.
He's obviously on a show me deal. Should they have gone down that road? I mean, does he deserve another chance at this point? Just what's your impression when you saw that he signed there?
This is so controversial. My initial thought is that I wouldn't want him on my team. So I guess going with that, no, he doesn't deserve a second, third chance, however many he's had at this point. I mean, you upset your entire fan base. So I don't know if it was worth it.
Yeah, I mean, the team says, you know, I think Waddell mentioned that they did some background checks and talked to other people, and, you know, he was still comfortable doing it. Scott, what do you think of this?
I mean, to piggyback off of Kristy said, I mean, how many more chances is the guy going to get? But in upsetting the fan base like that, I'm not sure that's something you want to do, but they did it. It's going to be very interesting to see how he fits down there on a team that's good, that's going to be in the playoffs most likely and contending for a cup. It's going to be interesting to see how the season plays out with him down there with that group.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Well, Kristy, Scott, great job as always. Thank you so much for joining our panel and talking a little bit of free agency here. You know, there's still plenty more to come here, so we'll see where everything goes. But thank you both for joining, and we really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having us on.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, fans, thanks again. I appreciate everybody that's joined us all season long. Had some wonderful guests, some wonderful panels. You know, it's just time to get a little bit refreshed here. So again, in case you missed it earlier, we're going to take the entire month of August off so that we can get refreshed, and then we'll be back in September and we'll start to, you know, pick it back up again. So until next time, enjoy the rest of your summer, enjoy everything that's about to unfold, and we will see you in the month of September here on THW Live.